over tourism. It's a huge problem. It's going to continue even more this year. Last summer, 30,000 people a day were trying to climb up the Acropolis in Athens in 100-degree weather. That wasn't just an over-tourism issue, that was a public health issue. People were collapsing. Same thing was happening in Venice. In Amsterdam, the city council made a rule. They passed a law. No new hotels can be built. Not a new room can be added to the city. It's too crowded. In Venice, they were charging essentially €5 to make sure that you couldn't prove you had a hotel reservation. You had to pay €5. They wanted to get rid of all the day trippers. Guess what? The day trippers paid the €5, and even more people came. But when do you want to go to Venice? Now. When do you want to go to Europe? Now. Because the summer is not fun. How many people here have been to Greece? How many people here were in Greece in the summer? And you survived. Santorini is so bad that I sailed there last June. I never got off the ship. All I had to do was take out the binoculars and see thousands of people elbow to elbow. Same in Mykonos. If I went now, it would be great. So now you can change the calendar because you have availability of flights and cruise ships. How many people here like taking cruises? And you've done more than one? Okay. During COVID, the shipbuilders were not idle. They were still producing unbelievable ships of every size and pedigree, ranging from 100-passenger ships to the big Royal Caribbean ships that I like to joke are so large they have a high crime area on board. Well, think about it. If you add the number of passengers to crew on Oasis of the Seas, you're over 9,000 people on one ship. That is one depressing buffet. But I know why they built that ship, and they're building more. The Star of the Seas is coming out in about 2 months, which will even be bigger. Why did Royal Caribbean build those ships? Because they decided that we were idiots, that we didn't understand the world, that we were geographically ignorant. So what they did was they made the ship the destination. When I talk to people who come off the Oasis of the Seas, and I ask them, how did you like your cruise? They'll say, great. Then I'll say, where'd you go? And you know what they tell me? All the things they did on the ship. So, by the way, it's not a bad experience. It'll be an expensive experience because every single thing on that ship is a profit revenue generating center, right? But the good news is the number of ports of call for cruise ships in the world now has exponentially exploded. If we go back to the days of the Love Boat, some of us remember that show, right? Okay, Captain Stubing. How many ports of call were there for cruise ships? You ready? About 7, and 6 of them were in Nassau in the Bahamas, right? How many are there today? Who wants to guess? Get crazy.
200.
1,400. 1,400. Because all the ships that are coming out of different sizes can now go to ports at different times, and they have the access because of their size to go to different places that the big ships can't go. That opens up the entire world 24/7. You know, there was a time not too long ago that cruise lines dealt with repositioning cruises. They still do, where they're bringing them out of the Med in the winter to go down to Florida, or back over in the summer. Now a lot of these ships don't leave, they stay where they are because of what I just told you about going to Barcelona in December. But the cool thing is, the smaller ships are going to places that if you don't have an atlas, you wouldn't even know where they are, but they're amazing. How many people here know where the Kimberleys are? Anybody? Okay. The coast of Northwest Australia, phenomenal. How many people here know the island of St. Helena? Okay, show off. But for everybody else, I'm going to tell them. The island of St. Helena is smack dab in the middle of nowhere in the South Atlantic, midway between Africa and South America. Why is it amazing? Well, number one, it's a British overseas territory. There are about 4,000 people there. They even have a governor general. They only have one flight a week. That's it. You miss that flight, you're there for 2 weeks. But that's not the worst thing that could happen. Its distinction comes from its history. St. Helena was where Napoleon was exiled. Now, most of you think he was exiled in Elba. And you're right, he was. But then he escaped, and he fought the British at the Battle of Waterloo. And he lost. And the British were so pissed at him, they said, okay, your punishment is, we're going to send you to the one place you can never escape. So in 1815 he arrived on the island of St. Helena, and he died there in 1821. But it's an amazing place, and now you can take a cruise ship there, right? But we're just getting started. All the islands of Oceania, Tuvalu, Tonga, Kiribati. Who knows where Kiribati is? How many people here own an atlas? Not enough. Oh my God, early Christmas present time. Buy yourselves an atlas. You don't have to buy the $200 coffee table version. Buy the $10 pocketbook, put it on your bedside table, and every night amaze yourself, open it to a random page, and get blown away. How many countries in Africa? You're wrong, but you're close. No, you're way over. You're not going to the Showcase Showdown. It's 54. You were very close. Amazing. How many people have been in more than one country in Africa? And you guessed 57. But you know, it's unbelievable what's available to us today because we have longer range aircraft, which allow for non-stop service. We're dealing with countries that are finally embracing something called open skies, which allows you to fly freely between countries in a certain continent. In Africa, it's still a bit of a problem. In many cases, if you want to go from country A in Africa to country B in Africa, you almost have to go to Europe and double back. It's changing. It's changing. Now, one of the pieces that I do on our show, The Travel Detective, we do it every year, is a piece on secret flights. Right? Flights that are actually published, operating, that nobody here knows about. So, I'll give you an example. I needed to go from Buenos Aires to Sao Paulo. Which airline did I take? I'll give you a hint. Think crazy. Turkish. Now what's Turkish Airlines doing between Sao Paulo and Buenos Aires? The flight starts in Istanbul, goes to Sao Paulo, shuttles to Buenos Aires, flies back to Istanbul, but they can take local traffic. My airfare on a brand new 777 in business class was $100. If you're going from New York to Frankfurt, most of you would say Lufthansa, they fly it. United flies it, right? Which airline do I take? Think crazy. Singapore, one of the best airlines in the world, because they fly New York, Frankfurt, and then on to Singapore. New York to Milan. Emirates, they continue on to Dubai, right? The internet may not help you with that. A phone call will. And the airfare is almost inevitably cheaper, and you're gonna get better service. So the world is opening to you in big ways internationally, whether it's trains, planes, or cruise lines. This is good. It's essential. It opens so many doors. And let's face it, travel and tourism is the #1 industry in the world. It employs the most people. 1 out of every 10 jobs is in travel. 1 out of every 5 new jobs is travel. It's singularly responsible for the GDP of 93 countries. If they didn't have travel and tourism, they would collapse. Now, I know you're thinking, okay, we're talking about all these destinations. So here's my question to you. How many of you are worried about traveling overseas? Anybody? Okay. How many of you are worried about traveling to certain regions overseas? Okay. So let's get down to that. How many of you actually read a U.S. State Department advisory? Fully? You didn't put your hand up. Okay. They're well-intentioned, but 9 out of 10 times, they're misleading. Would you like to know why? Thank you. Work with me. The reason goes back to December 21st, 1988. That was Lockerbie, Pan Am 103. The U.S. State Department had received credible information that a U.S. airliner was going to be blown out of the skies in the next 3 days before Christmas. And who did they tell? Only State Department personnel. They didn't tell us. And 270 people died that day. And when the word got out that the State Department knew and didn't tell anybody, they started issuing State Department advisories for ridiculous reasons. If an American tore a fingernail in Peru, there was a State Department advisory. If a woman had her purse stolen in Cancun, it became a State Department advisory. And those 3 words instilled what in you? Fear. I'm not going, right? So, and they were not universally or equally applied. During all the bad days in Northern Ireland, there wasn't a single State Department advisory, and yet it was getting blown up more than any other location in the world. So, what do you do instead? I'm not going to tell you not to read them. Please do. But then also read the advisories from the British Foreign Office to their citizens. Easily accessible online, they do a better job. And then you're going to do one more thing, and that is, with very few exceptions, every single destination you want to go to has an English language newspaper. You can access it online. Read the last 30 issues of a daily. Then you can make an intelligent decision if you want to go somewhere. Now, I have a different metric for where I won't go. There are only about 5 places in the world I won't go. So, would I go to Iran tomorrow? Yes or no? Yes, I would. I know who's in control. Would I go to North Korea tomorrow? Yes, I would. I've been twice. I know who's in control. Would I go to Yemen tomorrow? No, I wouldn't, because no one's in control. And so, you narrow it down, and things open up. And when you think about only 5 places in the world you wouldn't go, your options are unbelievable, right? Now, right now, I wouldn't go to Syria, but in 3 months I might. All right, so you have more options than you think you do. Because if you do the numbers, and I'm gonna do them for you right now. Remember, we go back to December 21st, 1988. That's when 270 people, 259 of them Americans, were killed in Lockerbie. Start with that number. Since 1988, how many American civilian tourists, not military or government officials, but folks like us, have been killed by acts of terrorism or violence since 1988? Who wants to take a guess? You know it's at least 259. Anybody? Yell it out. No guesses?
1.
No, that would be very optimistic. The total number is less than 1,200 since 1988. Now let me try to put that in perspective. Every single week in this country, 1,100 Americans are seriously injured or killed in accidents in their own bathtubs. So when somebody says to me, I don't want to go, it's not safe, I'm going to stay home, my response to them is, it's okay with me, but if you want to take a bath, you're on your own. So you need to put things in perspective, right? And is there going to be street crime in every city? Of course, we practice common sense, but that's not going to stop me from going. There are neighborhoods, whether you're in Albania or Atlanta, that you wouldn't want to go to after dark. So don't go, but that doesn't stop you from coming to Atlanta. The same thing applies to as you begin to build your new bucket list with no seasons for 2025. And please get yourself an atlas. So we're going to get to more of that in a minute. But first, now that we know we're traveling, because you're here because you want to travel, the question is, how are you going to travel? And who are you going to listen to? You may remember we were promised back in December of 22, during the famous Southwest Airlines meltdown, that we're going to get a series, a set of fully defined air travelers' rights. Have we gotten them yet? No. The DOT has not moved quickly. However, they have done a few things that you need to know about. They've issued a new rule which won't take effect until February next month on delays and cancellations. So I'm going to tell you that rule. You need to know it. If your domestic flight is delayed by more than 3 hours, you now get immediate cash compensation from the airline. If your international flight is delayed more than 6 hours, the same thing applies. And that applies to any airline, domestic or foreign, that's flying to, within, or through the United States. So that's not just American, it's Air France. Doesn't matter. Now, will the airlines volunteer this information? No. But I'll have time for questions in a second. You need to remind me of that. Now, if you're traveling in Europe, the Europeans have been ahead of us for years. There's something called EC 261. That's European Rule 261 that does the exact same thing if you're flying within any of the 26 European Union countries. And that also applies to US airlines as well. Now, the reason why I'm saying it's not taking place until February is because under federal regulations, once a rule is proposed, there's a 60-day period for comment. That comment will now extend into the Trump administration, and the hope is that the Trump administration will keep the rule because it's an important rule. But there are other rules that you need to know as well. Last week, for the first time in the history of the US DOT, they fined JetBlue $2 million for intentionally operating dozens and dozens and dozens of chronically delayed flights that they knew when they published the schedule would be delayed. How ridiculous is that, right? Let me give you a little math here, because it applies right here in Atlanta and every other airport in the world. There is not an airport runway in the world that can accommodate more than 23 takeoffs in any given hour, because you have to have about 2.5 minutes of separation between takeoffs. So why are the airlines allowed to publish 40 departures at 8 a.m.? I failed math in high school, but that arithmetic I can do. We need the airports to be stronger, because otherwise planes don't get pushed back from gates, planes that land can't get to gates, we all know what happens next, and the delays happen. In the case of JetBlue, they operated 145 flights from JFK to Raleigh-Durham over a 9-month period that were late every single time. And they warned JetBlue, JetBlue ignored them, they got fined. Now here's the good news about the fine. And by the way, it's not a proposed fine, it's the fine that they settled on. They've already agreed to pay it. $1 million of that fine goes to the US Treasury. The other $1 million is split between all the passengers who were delayed. Thankfully, finally. But that's only the first of many fines to come. Way back when, TWA, how many people remember TWA? You know what it stands for? Try walking across. TWA, I have them for every airline, by the way. TWA had a flight every night called Flight 849 from JFK to LA. Left at 7, scheduled to leave at 7 p.m., arriving in LA about 9:45 Pacific time. It was never on time. In fact, within the airline industry and within TWA, the flight had another name, Late 49. And why was it late all the time? Because the airline intentionally kept it on the ground for incoming passengers from Europe who wanted to connect to the West. But you depended on a schedule to leave at 7, and you never got there on time. Under the DOT rules now, they would have gotten a $2 million fine. So they're now looking at American, United, Delta, Southwest, and every other airline. Because without severe economic consequences, bad behavior continues. How many people here remember the tarmac delay rule? Went into effect about 13 years ago, and for good reason. Airlines would get you on the plane, push back from the gate, and they keep you out there for more than 3 hours on the tarmac with no food, water, bathroom availability, and then cancel the flight. Well, that is cruel and unusual punishment, right? It's false imprisonment. So the DOT passed a rule, and the rule says if you push back from the gate and you keep them out there and you don't return to the gate within 3 hours, you're going to get a fine of up to $27,500 per passenger, not per incident. So a loaded 737, we're already into 7 figures. Now that rule went into effect 13 years ago. The airlines all protested, this is unfair, we can't do it. Really? How many fines have been assessed in 13 years? About 4. Financial consequences means bad behavior goes away. We all need to write our elected representatives and the US DOT to support them. Because in a world of deregulation and there are no rules, we're all victims. And that's what's happening now. How many people have enjoyed this space on your coach flight? Okay, good. For once, I don't see any hands going up. Here's what the airlines have been doing, and you need to know it. They've been cramming in more and more seats in the back of the plane. And the space between the seat in front of you and your neck has gotten narrower. In fact, it's not even a comfort issue, it's a safety issue. Every airline, every year, is required to prove that they can safely evacuate a fully loaded plane with half the exits blocked and in the dark in less than 90 seconds. And what a surprise. For years, every airline always passed the test. Now, how did they pass the test? You ready? They got to choose who did the test. They hired the cast of Cirque du Soleil. But it's gotten worse. The last 3 years, the airlines have gotten a waiver. They still do the test, but now they're allowed to do it on computer modeling. It's a joke. When was the last time you landed, even on a half-full flight, where you got off the plane in less than 12 minutes? With all the exits open. So we have a problem here. And it's your problem too, because it affects our safety. The FAA has already shown how messed up it is with the Boeing situation, with inspections, not just of manufacturers, but maintenance. And we now have a new administrator coming in. Let me be clear. The airlines and the manufacturers are not the partners or the client of the FAA. We are the client of the FAA. They regulate safety for us, but they don't do it. Do you know that up until about 6 months ago, this will give you an idea why Boeing's in such trouble? Boeing was allowed by the FAA to inspect their own airplanes. An employee of Boeing, if I built this podium and I told you to stand next to it and it's safe, don't do it. Because I don't know what I'm doing. The point is, that's the hugest conflict of interest ever. But it's even worse when it comes to maintenance. And so now, because of congressional hearings, Boeing is no longer allowed to inspect their own planes. As a result, Boeing's not building a lot of planes right now because there's nobody to inspect them. The FAA is understaffed. So that's why there have been supply chain issues. But we're moving in the right direction. However, the FAA also controls air traffic control. And we're in big trouble there. We have major air traffic control centers in the U.S. that are operating below an 85% staffing threshold. That means they're forcing their air traffic controllers to do mandatory overtime. The one job in the universe you don't want anybody doing overtime. This has got to get fixed. You can do that. Now, having said that, we're still living in the safest air safety environment in the history of civil aviation and commercial aviation. Granted, The last 2.5 weeks of 2024 were horrific. In fact, it was the worst year in aviation safety in like 2 decades. We had the Azerbaijan shoot down, and we had that terrible crash in Korea. But for those of you who are worried about air safety, keep in mind that you're not flying over conflicted airspace, and you're not getting hit by birds on a terrible runway. But bottom line is, we're still so safe. But can we improve on that? No. The question is, can we maintain it? And we can't maintain it if the FAA is not doing its job. So keep that in mind when we have a new administrator. It's all interlinked. Now, let's go back for a second to the internet. Remember, I'm not telling you to use the internet to shop, I'm telling you to use it to research. But when you do it to research, you may be making a classic error in the world of my favorite 2 words, artificial intelligence. And before we talk about artificial intelligence, let's deal with some natural stupidity first. Natural stupidity is this. What do I want artificial intelligence to do, really? We all think. We all have a brain. We all want to create and make intelligent decisions. So what I want artificial intelligence to do is to clean my dishes, wash my clothes, so that I can make intelligent decisions. I don't want it to make my decisions, so I have to wash my clothes. And the problem right now is artificial intelligence, there's the promise of it, and there's the threat. The promise is pretty amazing, so is the threat. I'll give you an example. When you go to make a reservation, you're giving those algorithms and those chatbots enough information so they can manipulate so many things about your travel experience that do not benefit you. If it knows you're traveling with your significant other, it's amazing how fast the price goes up. If it knows you're going to a funeral, a trip you have to go to, it's amazing how fast the price goes up. You know, we've all heard the word surge pricing or dynamic pricing. It's manipulated to do just that. So, for those of you who are going online, even to shop, if you want to go back online to even purchase, which I don't necessarily recommend, but you want to do it because it's convenient, my suggestion is clean out your cookies or use somebody else's computer, because they know too much, and it's not going to help you right now. It's too easily manipulated. Pauline Frommer, who you may know because of her legendary dad, who just recently passed away, Arthur Frommer, the author of the original, Europe on $5 a day guidebooks. Pauline Frommer does a lot of great books on travel. And she told me a fascinating story. 10% of the books that are sold on Amazon that are travel related are AI generated, with authors who do not exist. They look good, and they rip off authors who do. I'll give you an example. Pauline had a book about traveling to Italy, part of their regular series. And in one of the chapters, she talked about the pleasures of traveling to Italy in the fall. When they ripped her off and came out with an AI-generated book, that chapter was devoted to the dangers of falling in Italy. And yet, when you go to buy the book, you don't know. So, I'm a huge fan, by the way, of independent bookstores and actually holding it in my hand and looking at it first. Because this is where we're going. We've had people, I know my voice is terrible today, but people have basically manipulated my voice on AI, and my own staff didn't know it wasn't me. And I'm on the radio, and I'm on television. This is dangerous. You need credibility. You need to be able to trust. And just because it's on the internet, as you already know, doesn't mean it's true. So again, I encourage you. I use the internet 50 times a day, but I don't shop on the internet. I do it manually. I'll give you an example. I wanted to go to Hawaii from LA. Now, every single airline that I know of in America flies to Hawaii, Alaska, Hawaiian, Southwest, American, United, Delta, you name it. All the fares were pretty high because they already knew people were desperate to go to Hawaii, or they were all honeymoon couples. Every time I go to Hawaii by myself, I'm the only person in the cabin not saying I love you. But I picked up the phone and I called the travel agent. I said, can you get me a better deal? And she looked on her screen and said, I'm going to suggest something to you that's going to sound nuts. So let me tell you what the original fare was. The original fare from LA to Hawaii round trip was about $8.90. Pretty high. Coach. How much did I pay to go to Hawaii when she got on her screen? $330. A savings of $560. Why? Because it never would have shown up on my screen. But how did I get to Hawaii? I flew LA, Phoenix, Honolulu. So for an extra hour and a half, I saved $560. So this is the reason why I'm telling you, go ahead and shop, but don't buy. Research, but don't buy on the internet. And until there are more regulations on the manipulation of AI, look, we're still dealing with TikTok right now. Just heed my advice on this. You'll be better off in terms of the information you're giving out, as well as the price you're going to pay. Now, the other interesting thing about travel in the last 12 months is we've changed a lot of our behaviors. We're now doing things we never would have done before because we're able to do the math. We've all heard of jet setting, right? How about set jetting? Thank Emily in Paris, White Lotus, and Taylor Swift. 27% of the people who went to a concert overseas last year flew there. They flew to the concert. Why? Because the cost of the airline ticket, the hotel, and the concert ticket, including Taylor Swift, was less there than going to the concert in the US. Think about that. So people are getting smart, they're doing the math, and they're having a great time overseas at the same time. Now, hotels. The problem with hotels is that we've gotten to a certain plateau where the average 4-star hotel is $1,000 a night. And people were paying it. Now, how many people here heard the words revenge travel? Okay, it doesn't exist. It's refocused travel. People, when they came out of COVID, they said, you know what? I've been now up close and personal with my own mortality. Either I got COVID and thankfully survived, or people I love and care about didn't. I have no idea how long I'll be on the planet. So you know what? I'm not gonna buy a new car. I'm not gonna buy new clothes, new jewelry, new expensive electronic items. No, I wanna buy experience. And so they took all that money from those buckets and they moved it over. And they were not price sensitive at all. I want that room no matter what it costs, I'm going. And the prices went up. Well, guess what? Those prices, thankfully, are starting to come down. Because with all those new routes, there are more opportunities to go to other places, right? What's the #1 destination for Americans overseas? What is it?
Japan.
No, give me specific. Who said Paris? Correct. Why? You know why? Because you're all failed art history majors. You studied the painting in school, you feel like I gotta go see it once. You go over to Paris, you stand in line for 6 hours, and you come back an hour later going, it's so small. How many of you did that? Come on, you did. I know you did. I'm not telling you not to go to the Louvre. But guess what? There's art everywhere. The good news for 2025 is you can get everywhere. 2 caveats though. If you're going to the United Kingdom, this just kicked in last week, you now have to get something called an ETA. That's an electronic transportation authorization. You have to do it online, and you have to do it 72 hours before you buy your ticket. And it's going to cost you about $13. They're going to give you an electronic Visa number, which then when you make your reservation, you have to supply that. If you just go to the airport without it, you're not getting on the plane. In April, so coming up in about 2.5 months, that kicks in the European Union with something called an ETIA. Same deal. That'll cost you about $10. So be aware of that, because otherwise you're not going to go see the Louvre either. But other than that, other countries do it, by the way. Australia's had it for quite some time, an electronic travel authorization. It actually works pretty good. How many people here have global entry? How many people here think it's the best thing to happen since sliced bread? Right. How many people don't know what it is? Okay. Global entry. Well, this is a rhetorical question. How many people here want to be on an 11-hour flight to stand in line for 2 hours in customs when you get home? Global entry eliminates that. You apply for it, you have to do an interview, and then when you land, it's all biometric now. There used to be a time not too long ago where you had to put your passport in, have your fingerprints read. Now it takes about 20 seconds, right? They get your face, then you're clear to go. And that's happening overseas as well. In England, one of the great offenders, they now have e-gates at both Heathrow and Gatwick. You're not filling out any forms. It's your picture, you're in. Now, for those of you who are sentimentalists like me, who still like having stamps in your passport, give it up. As of November, no European Union country now stamps passports. And they don't do it in the United Kingdom either. So keep your old passports as keepsakes and remembrances, but that's where we're going now. And there's every reason to believe, with sophisticated biometrics, that in the next 3 years, we may not even have passports. By the way, is there anybody here who doesn't have a passport? And how fast are you going to get one? That's one answer, right away. Huh? No, you don't want to say a few months. You know why? Because it's January, right? Now's the time to get it, when nothing is crowded. If you wait a few months, you'll lose the summer. There'll be a 3-month waiting period to get it. Okay? So the one word that comes out of your vocabulary is later. Okay? But the good news is if you're gonna get a passport, get the thick one. Doesn't cost you any more money. Get the 52-pager one, not the 28-pager one. Because there are some countries that will not let you even enter if you don't have at least 2 free unstamped pages in your passport. And if your passport has less than 6 months of validity, some countries won't let you go. So just remember that. In the time we've got left, and let me give you our website, which by the way is free. It's not transactional. It's only informational. Stuff like we just talked about today. It's got the most imaginative name, petergreenberg.com. And it's free to subscribe. You can also ask me questions every week, which we answer. There are microphones there and there. If anybody's got a question, I am more than happy to answer them. So go for it. I said go for it. Here she comes. And stand as close to the mic as you can. Can we turn the mics on? All right, let's turn the mics on. Try again. No.
Is this one on?
That one's on. Go ahead.
I use sites like TripAdvisor, Klook, Viator, etc. to read reviews for hotels, tours, etc., etc. What do you think the accuracy is of those reviews? Do you think they're stacked, or is there a better place to go to get authentic reviews?
Let me answer it this way. I was checking into a hotel in New Jersey, and the bellman came up the stairs with me with my bags, and he said, "Here's my card if you need anything," right? Thank you very much. He leaves the room, I look at the card, and there's a note printed on it with the TripAdvisor logo saying, "Write a great review of the hotel and get a 10% discount." That gives you my answer to your question. I don't believe a single TripAdvisor review.
Do you think there is another website that exists that has more authentic reviews?
Yeah, it gets down to who do you trust? Who do you trust? You know, when TripAdvisor started, the concept was a good one, right? It was a trusted group, a community that would share information about their experience. TripAdvisor now has morphed into a booking engine. So, do you have friends and family you trust? Talk to them, and then expand the friends and family. Or go to sources that when you read them, you know they're telling the truth. Nobody pays me to say what I say. I'm not a spokesman for any product or service or country or government. When we do those shows with heads of state, they have no right of editorial review. Whatever happens, happens. Scares the crap out of them. And maybe it should. But the point is, if I didn't do that, I couldn't stand here. Okay? Does that work now?
Should, yeah.
Go. Okay, speak a little closer to it.
Thank you for the presentation. It was great. And I'm just curious about the 72 hours before for the ETA. Is it before booking your flight? Or is
Correct.
it before arriving here?
No, you book it 72 hours before you book your flight because you can't book your flight without that ETA number. Okay? And they tell us it will take about 72 hours max for them to process it. Okay? Great. Yes, sir.
Earlier, you were speaking about the airline travel delay compensation. I think it's 3 hours domestic, 6 hours international. Does that include weather-related delays, or
No.
just strictly mechanical? And
It includes delays or cancellations that are deemed under the airline's control. There are only two exceptions for that the airlines can hang their hat on. One you just mentioned, weather. If it's weather, it's weather. And two, it's if it's an air traffic ground stop done by the government. Other than that, if they're missing a pilot, if there's a plane late coming in to become the plane going out, if they're missing another crew member, if they're missing a part, they have to jack up and change a tire, that all comes under airline control and you get compensated.
thank you.
Yes, yes.
So thanks for being here. Every year, my girlfriends and I do a girls' trip.
I read that police report.
Not about us. And so we've done lots of different things. We've done a cruise to Antarctica. We were going to go to Egypt last year and we decided to cancel thinking safety.
I go to
And
Egypt
so
all
we
the
did a
time.
Panama Canal cruise. We're getting ready to leave for Finland in a couple of weeks, but we want to go to Egypt and our hubbies are not too keen on it in the
Okay.
safety realm. So could you talk about that?
I can talk very well about it because I just came back. I go to Egypt 2 to 3 times a year. My last name is Greenberg. I never feel unsafe or threatened. They're the most hospitable people in the world. How many people here have been to Egypt? Do you agree? Tell your husbands they need to go into an immediate therapy session. Where are they sitting? Where are they? Oh, okay, got it. Oh, right there. Oh, you're the wuss. Okay. Seriously, you practice basic common sense. It's the best place. We just finished a one-part of a 2-part series called Hidden Egypt. By the way, those shows called Hidden Egypt, I take you to the most extraordinary experiences that nobody knows about. So, no brochures, no guidebooks, no TripAdvisor, no tour bus, no gift shop. But even though nobody knows the experiences, they're all available to you. And when you see what's out there, they just reopened for the first time, because it was open a little bit, the Grand Egyptian Museum in Cairo. It will blow you away. Blow you away. But that's just the beginning, because you got to go down the Nile, and you got to go to Karnak, and you got to go. It's unreal. And by the way, do it off season. You'll have a great time. Okay?
I have a second part of that when you're
You know
talking
what?
about
Take the girlfriends.
when you're talking about using travel agents. Are there tips on finding a really good agent?
Yes. We live in a world of specialization, right? So the old days of a travel agent sending you to college and your wife on a girls trip or your husband on a business trip, those are over. So I use about 6 different travel agents, right, that specialize in different kinds of travel. It can be balloon travel, bicycle travel, Egypt travel, based on destination affinity experience. And there are great travel consortia out there. One is called Virtuoso, one is called Signature, and one is called Travel Leaders. Each one of those groups, they have agents within those groups that specialize in, so for example, they have one there that's nothing but Egypt. And they have preferred supplier relationships that that other guy doesn't have. That's who you want. So you don't have one agent, you have 6. Yes.
So a romantic train trip was quickly squashed when we got in the sleeping car on Amtrak. And I'm not a contortionist. If you were going to take a train trip anywhere in the world, would you recommend some place where like 2 human beings could be comfortable?
Well, sure. But by the way, I've taken the sleeping car and Amtrak, and I'm not a little guy. I had a great time. But there's, in Australia, there's the Indian Pacific. It literally goes from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. It's the largest piece of straight railroad track in the world, and they have great sleeper cars. In Africa, it's a little pricey, but boy, is it worth it. Rovos Rail. It goes from Pretoria all the way to Victoria Falls. Check it out. It is absolutely worth it, and you'll have a great time, and your wife won't divorce you. Last 2 questions, and I gotta go.
Okay, quick question. We flew into Benin, Africa, and then we got on a motor coach, went through Togo over to Ghana. Now, going from Benin to Togo, they were corrupt, I guess. They made us pay additional money before they would actually let us through. Is there anything that you could do?
There's corruption between Newark and Hackensack too. So here's the deal. You've noticed that, right? Okay. So not to make fun of that. Were you with an organized group?
One of them, yeah.
Well, wait a second. Did the group organize the trip?
Yes. Well, I worked with agents.
No, I'm saying, were you on a group travel trip where you had a group leader in your group?
I was the group leader.
But no, but you weren't, yeah, but you didn't pay yourself. I'm saying if you did Trafalgar Group or Kontiki or TAUC or any of those groups, that never would have happened. Right? But look, so much of the world is based on bakshish. How much did they ask you for?
I'm sorry.
How much did they ask you for? How much money?
$100 per person.
That's pretty rich. Okay, I hate to say it. It's negotiable. Because you're a captive audience at that point. You have nobody else protecting your rights, right? And by the way, kudos to you for going to Benin and Togo. Unbelievable. Congratulations. But I can't tell you how many border guards are asking for a little money. And you know what? They control the border. So you have a choice. Get off the bus or negotiate.
Yeah, there were 32 of us. And
Oh, somebody just bought a summer home.
they held us for like 5 hours until
You're bearing the lead now. You should have started with that. Why did they hold you for 5 hours?
they were waiting for us to pay. We didn't pay immediately.
Well, okay, let's talk later. Okay? Last question.
Yeah, I was supposed to go on a spa trip in February with a friend who puts together this trip every year for friends of hers to Mexico, about an hour outside of Mexico City.
Yeah.
My daughter convinced me not to go.
Is she an expert in Mexico?
Pardon me?
Is she an expert in Mexico?
No, she's not.
Then she convinced you.
She did.
And what was the argument?
Well, she just felt it might not be safe, and I did go online where I saw there was travel.
When you leave this auditorium, don't turn right.
Okay.
Because it might not be safe.
Okay.
The point that I'm making, guys, is I gave you the tools. Read the advisories, then read the local newspapers, read the British Foreign Office advisories, then make an informed decision. Or you can go to our website, seriously, or listen to us on the radio, and we'll have an intelligent discussion about that.
Okay. Well, I did online see that they have
They've issued travel advisories from Camden, New Jersey. The point is, under the Trump administration, they've issued travel advisories for every country in the world. And you know what? They're meaningless, except for the obvious ones. I don't think anybody right now is thinking of vacationing in Damascus for the moment. But Mexico, go back and look at the travel advisory. There's one for every country in the world. Do you know what the travel advisory is, just to help you out, for Indonesia? It's Americans are warned to stay away from large crowds and avoid buses. I live in New York, I avoid large crowds and I avoid. So what does that mean? You know what the one in Turkey is? Be aware that Turkish drivers pass on the left and the right. Oh my God, has anybody been on I-75? So you have to put this in perspective or you'll have a knee-jerk reaction, which I understand, to fear. And hopefully today we've mitigated part of that. I encourage you to watch our shows. Email me if you want, peter@petergreenberg.com. We can continue that conversation. And the next time I talk to you, I promise you, I'll have a better voice. Thank you so much.